Heroes are known to give their lives for the sake of the people who they trust yet betray them. Alan, the lazy-ass hero, doesn't want to be reborn as a hero in his second life, but he wakes up as the first son in the ducal house of Westfelt. Alan's younger brother wakes Alan and brings him to their father, who casts Alan out to the joy of his brother. Whereas, the useless lump who has not gone beyond level 1 since he was born is happy to leave the ducal house of Westfelt because he recognizes it as his chance for freedom at last. A butterfly flies past Alan outside the house, and he decides to go to the borderlands on the eastern edge of the Westfelt territory. While fishing, he thinks about living a peaceful life where no one is scared of him. During his journey, he notices Beatrice, the princess's guard, and Lisa, the first princess of Adoestella, in a dire situation where they try to defeat monsters that generate after every slash that Beatrice throws. Being the wicked hero who doesn't want to use his powers from his past life, even after Lisa once stood up for him when they were younger, it takes the wound on Beatrice to make him decide to help the damsels in distress. Alan jumps from his position and flies over like a rocket to where Lisa is. He lands the moment Lisa calls his name because he's the only one she can think of in that moment of danger. When Lisa asks Alan why he is there, he focuses on the monsters and promises to give Lisa the details later. He activates his divine eyes and concludes that the monsters are sorcerous life forms, clay wolves with cores that he needs to break. He lifts his sword into a 100-floor bloom and casts them directly at the wolves, destroying them completely. Once that's taken care of, he walks back to Lisa and Beatrice. Beatrice apologizes to Lisa for her incompetence, and thanks Alan for showing up when they need someone the most. To save the dying Beatrice, Alan is forced to show another form of his power when he heals Beatrice. The girls ask Alan where he got such power, but while he thinks about what to say instead of telling the girls that he inherited it from his past life, they conclude that it must be a gift of a rank the church is unaware of. Beatrice adds that they are on their way to Clume Village in the borderlands, and Alan is the one who saved them from the disaster that tried to stop them. When Lise asks Alan why he's going to the borderlands, he fixes the damaged wagon instead of replying, and during the journey, he tells a surprised Lise that he was cast out. Alan and Beatrice agree that Lise shouldn't allow Alan to go after she has seen the kind of powers he possesses, but Lise says she'll put the interest of Alan first because he's her friend. On arrival in the village, the trio does not meet any of the villagers, and they wonder what may have gone wrong since Alan doesn't sense the presence of monsters, which means that the villagers are not running from monsters. After wandering for a while, they find the villagers gathered in front of the village head's house, and as if on cue, he opens the door to throw out his visitor, who happens to be the light Lisa is looking for. Lisa calls the visitor Akira, but Akira can't seem to remember who Lisa is until Lisa helps her reminisce. Beatrice explains to Alan that Braver, a special gift, is bestowed upon one person in a generation, and that person is referred to as a hero. Lisa adds that Akira is the current hero, and her revelation led her to help the hero. The trio with the addition of Akira eats lunch, and Akira explains that during her random traveling, while she passed by the current village, she came across a girl who was almost sacrificed to a dragon. Alan realizes that the village has been making sacrifices to the dragon to receive its protection, and Akira agrees with Alan's presumption because of the way she was treated by the village head. Forsaking an empty plate, Akira declares her intention to defeat the dragon because of the little girl she saw, even though the villagers may not want to be free from the dragon. Lisa, Beatrice, and Alan decide to go with Akira on this mission. Akira leads everyone to the mountain where the dragon resides, and they have a strategy meeting on arrival. Akira volunteers to attack the dragon in front, while the others join her using a side path. Alan asks to be allowed to take the front role, but Akira declines, saying she fears that Alan will take care of the dragon easily without them. She says she would love to spar with Alan, but she would rather wait for after the dragon is down. Alan watches over the two ladies as they climb the mountains with a rope, and they wonder why the Westfelf has left the village very close to them in danger. Alan says the Westfelf probably built the village in that arena for sacrifice. Akira watches the dragon scream into the sky and focuses dragon breath of fire on her, but being the hero, she strikes the dragon with lightning with her sovereign power. Unfortunately, the dragon is unscathed. The dragon tells Akira that he released the little girl who is now back in his custody to see how much fun it can get for him. Akira is pissed off, so she attacks with her sword and braver power, but the dragon doesn't get hurt, and he mocks Akira, asking if that was her being serious. The dragon whacks the hero out of her stance with his tail, and Akira is surprised to see that the dragon is much more powerful than she thought. The dragon tells Akira that she didn't do much to end his boredom, and he's ready to breathe fire on the helpless Akira. However, thanks to Alan, who shows up and slashes off one of the dragon's wings. Alan apologizes to Akira, saying he wasn't waiting for the right moment, hence delaying her rescue. Beatrice and Lisa run to help Akira out of worry. Alan chases the dragon and asks why it was making a mouth when it didn't have so much strength. The dragon charges at Alan in anger, and Alan tells Lisa to take care of Akira, while Beatrice takes the village girl to safety. Alan slashes the dragon a second time, and the dragon wonders how Alan can wound him with a dull blade when he's merely human. Alan says the dragon is rude for calling his blade dull because he's fond of it. He studies the dragon again and decides his world-end power will take down the dragon in no time. The dragon runs from Alan and stands on the girls, asking Alan to attack him if he's not willing to protect the girls. Lise nods her head at Alan, showing her trust in him, and Alan jumps ahead with his sword to attack the dragon who's about to breathe fire on them all. The moment Alan's sword pierces the dragon, light shines through the dragon's body, and the weather is restored to normal as the dragon disappears. Akira wakes up to see the little girl, and the girl cries when Akira asks about the dragon. Alan thinks that defeating the dragon is far from the peaceful life he wants, but he also thinks it's alright to help someone in need. Alan opens his eyes the next morning and Lisi is beside him. He sees Beatrice and Akira engaged in a playful sword fight. Lisi apologizes to Alan for keeping the fact that she's a saintess from him. Alan tells Lisa that it doesn't matter to him if she's a princess or saintess, because she'll always be Lisa to him. Akira sees that the lazy bum is awake, so she invites him to spar with her. Lisa invites Akira to journey with them, but Akira prefers traveling by leg rather than wagon. Beatrice asks if she's sure about going with the little girl, and Akira can't be more sure. Akira apologizes for Alan's broken sword, and also for relying on him to defeat the dragon. She offers her hero sword to him, saying that the sword is befitting for someone like him, but Alan tells Akira that he could beat the dragon because Akira fought with it first. Akira accepts the compliment and turns in the other direction, asking the little girl to follow her. Craig, the Duke of Westfelt, and Brett, Alan's younger brothers, receive a report through a hologram from the man they assigned to kill the hero. The man says the hero was helped by the Saintess, and Craig decides that the Saintess's power shouldn't be toyed with. Although Brett is annoyed that the man failed his plan, and they have to let the Saintess and the hero go scot-free, his father Craig tells him not to worry, because as long as the two remain in the borderlands, they can be killed easily. The man promises to bring the head of the elf to Craig and Brett soon. Lisa confirms to Alan that she knows a smith in Granholm, while Beatrice confirms that the smith is a peculiar elf with fine skills. Lisa says she knows it's her fault that Alan is with them, and he also got his sword broken, so she wants to use this medium to apologize, but Alan says it's not her fault. The trio takes a break from the journey at nighttime, and while Beatrice is still gathering the wood to set up a fire, Alan creates a fire with his magic, causing Beatrice to jump. Feeling relaxed, Lisa rests her head on Alan's lap, but she jumps up immediately and apologizes for the gesture. Beatrice tells her not to worry, since she's Alan's fiancé. Lisa corrects Beatrice by saying that Alan is her ex. In the end, Beatrice sleeps with her back to the tree, while Lisa rests her head on Alan's shoulders. Alan is happy about the peace in that simple gathering, and he remembers his first meeting with Lisa and how she wanted to get to know him because they were betrothed. Alan wants his life to remain this peaceful. The next day, they enter Granholm, and Alan thinks the town is lively, even though it's somewhere near the borders. Beatrice says that this is because of adventurers who stay in such towns since they have work to do close by. After a little while, the trio arrive in a secluded house in the town, and Lisa says it's the smith's house. Despite the unusual atmosphere, Alan discovers that the door of the house is open, and Lisa calls out for Noelle, the smith, as soon as they are inside. Lisa finds Noelle subtly unconscious, and she screams, making Alan run to her from where he stood, observing the beautiful swords in the house. Beatrice reminds Lisa that nothing is wrong with Noelle, because it's a normal thing for Noelle to fall into a deep unconscious sleep, since she always forgets to eat, sleep, and rest whenever she works. Lisa heals Noelle, and she stretches awake but declines to forge a blade for Alan because she's busy. She says Alan has his sword, but Alan shows that it's broken. After calling Alan someone with lackluster skill, she assesses his broken blade and sees that he has been using a sword at its absolute limit. She wonders how that has been possible, and this causes her to change her mind about making the sword. She asks Alan if he would love to use a blade that surpasses the divine sword of the hero, because she has picked Alan to bear the sword. When Alan agrees, she kicks out the trip to start work immediately. Noelle recalls Vanessa, and she can't wait to make the sword. A young lady watches the trio as they leave the elf's house. She reports to the man from the hologram earlier, and they decide to investigate Alan since he wasn't supposed to be with the princess. The trio finds a place to sit, and Lisa indulges Alan to visit the Adventurers Guild and sell dragon materials. The girls say they'll sightsee while he's gone. However, Lisa and Beatrice want to do something else without troubling Alan. The attendant at the guild runs to the branch manager with the dragon scales immediately after she sees them. The man from the hologram, who introduces himself as Horace, and the girl from Noelle's place, Mylene, meet with Alan and ask about the dragon. Alan is surprised to see an Amazoness Mylene in town. Horace and Mylene leave after confirming that the person who defeated the dragon was the hero, not Alan. Horace thinks Alan is a trivial opponent, but Mylene thinks he may be dangerous. When the trio visits Noelle later, they find that she has fainted again. Lise heals her as usual, and once she opens her eyes, she tells them that she is done making the sword. She points to it and says she wants Alan to test it in front of her immediately, but Lise tells her to get better first. Alan and Noelle enter the forest to test the sword. Alan asks how Noelle, who's an elf, became a smith since the job is better made for dwarves. Noelle says she was raised by a dwarf, and even though Vanessa, the dwarf, didn't teach her anything, she's still her dear master. Noelle runs off saying they should start, but Horace and Mylene appear to Alan again, asking if he's working based on the guild's request. Alan doesn't dispute this idea. Horace asks Mylene to shadow Alan and stop him from discovering their secret when they are by themselves again. Alan slashes some bees and various monsters with utmost relish. Noelle says her gift can see the sword's sharpness, strength, and everything that the naked eye can't see. Wanting to see Alan do more, Noelle suggests that they go deeper into the forest. Noelle is surprised when they have walked some distance with no monster, and she wonders if they are afraid of Alan, but Alan thinks otherwise. He uses the sword to reveal a hidden atmosphere. Both Noelle and Alan see a monster, and Noelle asks Alan to kill it. Noelle watches Vanessa bang the sword she's making, but no matter what Noelle says, Vanessa doesn't utter a word of response. Even when she's hungry, she has to find something in the house to eat by herself. She returns to Vanessa and picks a sword to earn her attention, but only ends up falling. Calls her stupid for being concerned only about the sword, and not even herself. Vanessa doesn't stand up until she's done with the sword the next day, and even Noelle is amazed to see the result of the sword Vanessa made. Alan refuses to attack Fenrir because that feat will only take the finest of top-class weapons. That is the sacred sword or something better. He reminds Noelle that the blade with him wouldn't leave a single scratch, and he assumes that she knows that. Back at home, Alan tells Beatrice and Lise about the Fenrir they saw in the forest and how it was cloaked in some power, and they wonder who may have brought it there and for what reason. Unable to answer the question, Alan asks Lisa if they have completed what they came for, because he knows that they didn't come to the village solely to make a sword for him. Lisa tells Alan about General Cyril's death and the missing head. Beatrice adds that they haven't found out who committed the atrocity because not a shred of evidence was found, and they suspect a demon may have committed the murder, so they came to investigate in the town. Alan thinks he met someone suspicious. Mylene wonders who broke the seal to reveal Fenrir, and she thinks it doesn't matter because their mission is about to end. She doesn't report to Horace, but he asks her to kill the elf and Saintess, since he has control over Mylene because of the servant's yoke around her neck. Noelle is forging the sword as per Alan's advice, but she becomes weak, and in her unconsciousness, she recalls Vanessa's death. On the fateful day, Horace tells Vanessa that she has to be killed because they can't have an increase in keen blades to rival sacred swords. Vanessa strikes the head of the Fenrir that attacks her with a sword, but it breaks the moment it hits the monster, and from her stats of despair, Noelle shouts Vanessa's name. The Fenrir bites Vanessa, rendering her helpless. When the monster turns on Noelle, the hero suddenly appears, and she strikes and draws her sword to stop the monster. The monster faces her, and she lifts her sword again. This time, she runs past the monster, creating a wound that makes Horace run away with Fenrir. Noelle runs to Vanessa at the chance she gets, and pushes Akira when she offers to find a way to clear Vanessa's wounds. Noelle couldn't stop herself from wondering why Akira could strike the monster easily, yet her master didn't stand a chance because her sword wasn't up to the sacred sword yet. Noelle gets up from the floor and wonders if Lisa is the one who'd come to heal her when she fainted, but she doesn't see anyone outside. Alan stands in a place where he's well hidden and scoffs, saying he told Noelle not to be reckless, but the dimwit doesn't listen. After completing the sword, Noelle decides to use it on the monster in the forest herself. Once Noelle reaches the sleeping Fenrir, she attempts to stab it, but the monster opens its eyes and kicks Noelle away. Horace appears, as Noelle attempts to attack the monster again, and he says that she must be strong to still be standing after receiving a blow from Fenrir. Noelle asks Horace if they want to kill her like they killed Vanessa. This makes Horace recall that Noelle was the young girl with Vanessa when she was murdered, and Horace thinks it's fate that both master and apprentice are killed by the same monster. Summoning courage, Noelle gets up again and tries to stab the monster, but this time, it passes beside her and kicks her with his hind feet. Horace says he'd like to discuss something with Noelle before he kills her, and he asks her to become his slave because he had that she possessed the eyes of the fairy sovereign, Graham's sight, which is one of the 5 known inborn gifts. Noelle refuses to become Horace's slave, and her resolve is tightened when she hears that Mylene became Horace's slave because she possessed an inborn gift and Horace destroyed her village. Because of Noelle's refusal, Horace sends the monster to kill Noel, but the knight in failure armor comes to Noel's rescue. Alan apologizes for his late arrival, and Horace asks why Alan has chosen the wrong place when he should be guarding Lisa because she could be in trouble. Alan tells Noel not to worry because he put up a barrier to nullify Mylene's invisibility if she tries to attack Lisa and Beatrice. Lisa and Beatrice have caught up to the presence of Mylene in their room when Mylene uncovers the bed and sees pillows instead of Lisa. From where he is, Alan watches Lisa and Beatrice defeat Mylene, and he tells Horace that his assassination plan fell through, but Horace refuses to believe it. Instead, he believes that Alan can't inflict any wound on Fenrir because they don't have a sacred sword. Alan shocks Horace by slashing the monster when it runs towards Alan. Before Alan can turn on Horace, Horace disappears. Alan carries a sleeping Noelle on his back and brings her to a worried Lise, who is glad to see them back alive. Noelle wakes up and causes a tantrum because Alan is carrying her on his back. Mylene is tied to a chair, and Alan and the others watch her. Lisa says Mylene should be able to speak because she has been freed from the control of Horace's subordination. Beatrice thinks Mylene should be taken to the capital for trial for her attempt on Lisa's life, but Lisa doesn't think Mylene should be punished for what she didn't decide to do herself. She thinks Mylene may have family to return to, and this finally makes Mylene speak. Mylene says that she has no family because Horace burned them all. Noelle remembers when she was in such a situation, and she offers to take Mylene home with her, so she cuts the rope that binds her. Mylene sheds tears that makes Beatrice feel bad, but Alan reminds them that it's a reason to be relieved because one problem is solved. Alan goes back to the forest to find Horace, who thinks he has gotten away far enough from Alan while he wonders who Alan is. A demon kills Horace, and by the time Alan gets there, it is too late. The demon reports to Craig and Brett that he killed Horace before he could release any information. Brett says that the demons aren't even so strong because all they've done is bring the head of the general. The demon looks at Brett dangerously and promises to kill the elf and the saintess. Brett tells his father to leave the archbishop to him and handle the hero. Lisa dreams about the attack that occurred years ago involving her and her uncle. In the dream, they are riding quietly in a carriage when monsters suddenly attack them. The carriage topples over, and Lisa screams while her uncle comes out quickly to stab the beast. While fighting off the monster, Lisa's uncle gets pierced by its claws and falls into the river below, while Lisa lies in the carriage, stunned. As his journey continues, Alan, the lazy hero, comes across a peaceful village with Lisa and Beatrice, where villagers prepare for a festival. Alan inquires more about the festival, and a villager tells him it's called the Returning Spirits Festival, where they welcome the departed spirits of their ancestors. Beatrice wonders what kind of festival it is, and another villager mentions that it is a unique festival where they wear costumes and dance around. Lisa asks about the main reason for their presence, specifically mentioning a man in silver armor who has been seen in the village. The villagers inform her that they haven't seen anyone with that description and apologize for being unable to help. Alan looks on, apparently noticing something off about the village. He sees someone he seems to have recognized and flashes back to his conversation with the rest of the party. After getting no leads from that day, Mylene returns to inform the others while Noelle tells them about a ghost that supposedly comes to a village wearing silver armor and walks through the graveyard night after night. Beatrice becomes scared, which makes the others look at her. Mylene and Noelle come close to her, and she starts arguing with them to prove that she's not scared of ghosts. Alan then decides that they should investigate the happenings of that village. Thinking back on the conversation, Alan and the other two decide to check the village cemetery. On getting there, Beatrice screams when they hear a twig snap behind them, but it is only one of the villagers. He takes them to the village head to get more information about what they're searching for, saying no one is more knowledgeable. The villager tells Alan he is just passing by the cemetery after Alan questions him about his activities there. They thank him, and he leaves. The village head refutes the rumors and tells them he has not heard or seen anything like that. He offers them shelter for the night and invites them to their festival, which Alan accepts. In the house, Lisa has another dream about her uncle. In this dream, which is more like a memory, Lisa runs excitedly towards her uncle, referring to him as her father. He corrects her, but she tells him he's like a father to her, and she likes having two fathers. Her uncle told her he'd leave for a while and just came to say hello. He gives her parting advice, telling her to believe people in every situation because it is essential. She is woken in the same dream and led by an apparition of her uncle to the cemetery, where the undead attacks her. Lisa screams from her sleep, and Alan wakes her. Still in shock, she holds on to him for a while. The festival starts, and all the villagers dress in cloaks and masks, dancing around a fire. Alan and his party stand afar, observing them as Beatrice adds that the way they're celebrating the dead isn't acceptable in the kingdom. Alan tells her she can stop it, but she says they aren't causing harm. Alan keeps observing the villagers, and though they seem natural, he still isn't settled about them. The villager from earlier comes and invites them to join the dance. Beatrice and Alan agree while Lisa stands to rest. While she stands, Lisa is called from behind by her uncle. He walks away, and Lisa chases him into the woods, past a crowd of mask-wearing villagers. Breathless, Lisa finally gets to him, and he asks her why she's there on her own, but she tells him she is safe as long as he's there. Lisa tells him of how they've been searching for him ever since the accident. He then tells her how he has been surviving and resenting the royal family, which makes Lisa gasp. Her uncle tells her all the plans the king has in store for her and the rest of those with inborn gifts, which he calls puppets of the supreme beings, and he invites her to defeat the king with him. She, who is the saintess, is also a target of the king. Lisa believes him, but tells him that she feels if they talk, they can come to an understanding. And that's when her uncle, who initially said he wants to save her, raises his sword to strike her, but Alan comes in time to save her. He mentions that he has been watching them for a while. Alan breaks the spell cast on Lisa's uncle by the king's demon, explaining to them that he's already dead, and why he decided to leave his position as second in command to the king. Her uncle then instructs Alan to take care of her because she's the only one he cares about, and she can sometimes be reckless. Another request he makes is for Alan to spar with him, and he obliges him. As the spar, Lisa remembers how he promised to protect her until another comes, and he explains that it is that one night that the dead can come to life. As the rain begins to fall, Lisa's uncle leaves the land of the living, telling Lisa that she genuinely is his daughter. He tells her to find happiness, and she cries about how blessed she has been. Later that night, Alan stands on a rooftop and observes the village. The village head approaches him and asks him when he noticed the odd thing about the town, and he tells him he knew right from the start. He knew that the villagers were dead and that the village head was controlling them. He asks him why he didn't react, knowing that the village head was a demon, and Alan tells him not all demons were evil. The village head then summons a crowd of undead to attack Alan, but he defeats them with one stroke and takes the demon's gem. The demon reports back to the king, and Brett is angry that Lise got away, but Craig tells him that at least they have the head of the archbishop. Their carriage ride continues, and Beatrice pledges undying support to Lisa while Alan observes the gem. He wonders what powers lie in it and thinks of Brett. Just then, a message comes for Lisa saying that General Cyril is back, and they all gasp. Brett, Alan's younger brother, is haunted by his insecurities of being a failure. In his dream, we can see the day Brett's mum is buried and how Alan stands by him. Brett narrates and adds that it is from that day that his father starts looking at him with disdain and pity. He overhears some workers talking about his brother more favorably than he does, and gets jealous even so that the next time his brother stretches a hand to him, he rejects it. He narrates that he's glad Alan isn't there anymore for his father to compare him to. He wakes up from the dream with a start after being called a failure by his father. Brett goes to greet his father, who laughs and tells him that it is time to begin their revenge. Brett bows and thinks that only he is worthy to rule the kingdom. The town is abuzz with gossip about General Cyril, who is supposedly dead but has reappeared. Captain Edward and Clark take a walk and talk about the situation. He tells him the rumor is spreading far too quickly and asks the captain what he makes of the problem, asking if he thinks the general is an imposter. Edward tells Clark not to get too lost in the details because no matter who the general is, it doesn't change what the Premier Night Squadron must do. He tells him that they'll protect the kingdom from whoever chooses to harm it, which is something Cyril always did. Clark agrees, and as they walk through an alley, the Archbishop appears and takes Edward away to inform him about something only he can know. Clark is worried, but Edward calms him. The Archbishop takes Edward to the training ground and leaves him there. Then, soon enough, he's attacked from behind by Craig. Edward tells him he's the only one who can spar without exchanging pleasantries. He also adds that they've not seen each other since the day of the burial, and that's when Craig smiles and tells him the Archbishop already belongs to them. As they continue to cross swords, Edward asks him what he means, but Craig tells him their fight brings back memories of their training together, but he no longer needs that world. In the carriage, The Failure, Brett is deep in thought. He remembers the day of the burial when he was with his brother, and also when he asked him if he was a failure. Alan tells him there is no value in arbitrary judgment people pass, but Brett doesn't believe him and runs away crying. Their father finally acknowledges him because he leveled up faster, but still calls Alan a failure, which makes Brett angry later. Alan tells him he is happy that Brett got rewarded for his hard work. Brett gets angrier and tells him he isn't fit to inherit Westfeld's house. Alan tells him he's right, and he believes he can rule, but is cut off when he starts to talk about what will happen if he ever goes into the wrong part. Brett wonders why he remembers the events, and that's when a demon appears to update him about their plan's progress. The demon asks him how his side is faring, and he tells him they've used the Archbishop to lure Edward, whose gift can nullify other gifts in a wear radius. The demon is worried that Edward's gifts can be problematic, but Brett assures him that his father is taking care of it, and that if the worst comes to worst, he'll handle it. Another demon appears and gives a report, and Brett is shocked when the demon tells him he has failed up till this point, so they'll be lending him some of their powers so he shouldn't screw it up. They disappear, and Brett determines not to be a useless brat like Alan. Akira and Sarah take a walk through the village, and although Sarah is scared, Akira assures her that she'll take her to someplace safe soon. They get to a dark and quiet ground, and are soon attacked by demons. The demons boast about attacking her, and Akira tells them they can't do anything, nor with Sarah there. One of the demons laughs and informs her of the sigils planted in all the villagers, so he can set it off now, blasting them both. He gives her options to run and leave Sarah or stay and die. Sarah pushes Akira away to run, but she disagrees and returns to hold her close as the demon blasts them. Clark and the other knights walk, and he tells them he's worried about Edward. Then a demon appears, and the knights are about to strike, but he informs them he only wants to tell them the truth about that world. In a gathering of all the villagers, Brett controls the captain and the archbishop with spells, and makes them lie to the whole village. The archbishop and the captain tell them they've been lied to by the supreme beings, because gifts weren't blessings. They go further to say they were used as puppets by the supreme beings, and the only way to be free from it is to give up their gifts. Just then, Brett comes in and addresses the crowd. He shows them a monster who can help them defeat the supreme beings, and tells them that with his powers, they can harness any power they want, which makes them unstoppable. The crowd murmurs as they take this in, and one asks what will be done when Brett dies. As if he heard them, Brett reveals to everyone's shock that demons are also on their side, so they should go on to lead a life free from gifts. He keeps riling up the crowd, and as they cheer, he basks in the glory of their praises. Craig and Edward's fight continues, but Craig is no match for him because of his level. Meanwhile, Clark and the knights prepare to attack the demon, saying they will protect the kingdom at all costs. The demon disappears and slays some of the knights. He injures Clark, who doesn't back down much to the demon's surprise. The demon calls him a fool and is about to attack when Beatrice comes in to help. Edward and Craig's fight continues, and Edward is about to be subdued when Akira appears, disguised in a cloak worn by demons. She reveals herself, to Craig's shock. A flashback shows Sarah and Akira being protected by a force that had come up with Alan previously overriding the sigil. Akira is initially shocked about how much Alan knows. Brett is still with the people, riling them up and imagining the world in his hands, when he hears a voice asking if he's enjoying himself. He looks into the crowd and sees Alan. He gasps in shock and asks himself what the useless failure is doing there. Alan holds up a stone that reveals the ongoing conversation between Beatrice and the demon about to kill her and the other knights. This conversation is loud enough for the whole crowd of villagers to hear, and Beatrice asks questions, knowing full well the answers the demon will give. The demon reveals the plan he and the Westfelt family were working on, and says he will tell them because they will die anyway. Unknown to him, Mylene has hidden herself with a disappearing spell and is communicating the conversation to Alan with the second stone. The demon reveals that they plan to kill the general and the princess because they'll only incite people to use their gifts, and Brett gets angry, saying Alan is spoiling his scheme. The crowd of villagers hear the word speech and then gasp in shock if what they had just heard could have been confirmed. Brett angrily asks Alan to stop whatever he's doing, but the people begin questioning Lise about whether she was targeted, and she affirms it. She tells them that the monster Brett showed them earlier was the type of monster that attacked her. The people process this information with shock, and Brett gets angry and starts laughing like a maniac because his plan has been discovered. He tries to use a marionette to control some knights to attack Alan, but Alan frees them from the spell, also freeing Edward and the archbishop in the process. Brett's anger makes the monster react, attacking the villagers. Lisa shouts, telling everyone to take shelter, while Alan thinks that though he tried his best with Brett, he will still stop him. Brett tries to use marionette on him again, and he drags him down and punches him. Lise takes a crying boy away and asks Alan if it won't be painful for him to stop Brett. Alan smiles and remembers the times his father called him a failure. He thinks that though he's a failure, he'll be alright. The battle between the demon and Beatrice continues, and Mylene helps her to hide herself with her powers. When the demon notices that they're stronger than he is, now that Mylene is on their side, he wants to disappear, but they both strike him before he can leave, and he fades into oblivion. Clark kneels and thanks Beatrice for her help, and is about to ask her questions, but she tells him they don't have time because the capital is under a rampage from those demons, and they're causing chaos in all sections of the capital. Clark and his knights pledge allegiance to Beatrice and promise to lend her all the help she will need. Just then, Noel comes in with many weapons, telling them they can't fight in a battered state. The vice captain thanks Beatrice again for her help, and Noel smiles as she thinks about how Alan's plans are well thought out. The fight between Akira, Edward, and Craig continues, and Craig begins to exude so much power. This appears to be bad for Akira and Edward because he seems to know their moves before they do it. Edward tells Akira that Craig's gift is an undertaker, meaning he can sense the future. Edward tells Craig he shouldn't act that way because that's not what Marielle, his wife, would have wanted. As he hears her name, he begins to tell them about how helpless he felt because he kept sensing her death but couldn't do anything about it. He begins to cry blood, saying Marielle's life was like a pawn for the supreme beings because she was fated to give birth to a hero. but she gave birth to Alan, a failure. So what did she die for? Because of his anger, he wants all the gifts in the world to disappear. Akira tells him to let go, but he doesn't listen and seems to exchange his rage for more power. They attack each other at once, and their powers seem to be equal. Akira gets blasted across the wall. Edward is shocked that Craig's power is from demons and asks him to stop or else he won't be himself anymore. Craig blasts him, and Edward gets an insight into the rage, pain, and sorrow Craig is feeling and tries to reason with him. He apologizes for how Craig is feeling and thinks he has calmed down. Edward approaches him but gets stabbed. Akira is in shock and asks him why he killed him when he was only concerned about him till the very end. Craig doesn't care though, and instead proceeds to attack Akira, saved in time by Alan. Alan apologizes for coming late, and Craig laughs, wondering why Alan, of all people, will show up. Alan tells him he's not pleased to be there as well, but Craig tells him he's just a failure and blasts him. Alan shields the blast to Craig's shock and wonders who Alan is. Alan smiles and tells him sarcastically that he's a failure. He continues that though he is a failure, there are some people he can't just neglect because even his mother wouldn't have wanted that. Craig gets angry and asks Alan not to speak of Marielle as he boasts him. Alan gets hit and is transported to a deep sea where he has access to the memories of his father and all the pain he felt when Marielle died. He realizes that he had no idea of how much Craig loved his mother, and how much he hadn't seen it or chosen not to see it. A person's weakness clouding one's thoughts is a pain he knows too well, and he chose to avoid getting involved, but there still exists those who believe him in that world. He uses all his might to get out of that place and boasts Craig back, who releases all his energy into the sky, causing a deep darkness to fall on the whole kingdom. Lisi tells everyone to keep calm, and that Alan will control the situation. Akira tells Alan that the situation looks like it's more than human capabilities, but he tells her that he has to stop Craig. He moves closer and strikes him, and then meets a moving purple light. He realizes that his father wasn't that way because of his failure, but he has been a prisoner to rage because he felt betrayed by the supreme beings. He stabs the moving light and releases the rage as a butterfly appears and touches Craig, who breaks into pieces, calling Alan a failure. He cries and calls Marielle's name as he breaks. Alan kneels at the front of the king, who offers him the position of the Duke of Westfelt because of his services. Alan smiles and rejects the position. Later on, the king's aide asks him if he's sure about his decision, and he tells him he knows Alan will reject the position. He has heard a lot about him from Lisa, and about how he protected her. He says that's the greatest honor he can bestow. Somewhere in the kingdom, Alan tells Malene and Noelle that he's coming to Granholm, and Lisa catches up with them. She tells them she has been given responsibility over Westfelt, and she'd love to come with them. They ask her about Beatrice's whereabouts, and she tells them that Beatrice is pleading with the king for her to follow Lisa, and knowing her, they don't need to worry. Alan looks at them and thinks that though he's a failure, there are still people that need him in that world, and he smiles as Noelle announces that they're about to leave. Lisa drags him into the carriage and they leave. She starts to talk about how great the kingdom is for giving such a great reward. A girl sits in her room and looks into Alan's life, smiling and saying he just can't help but be a hero. Alan wakes up after a nostalgic dream where someone cried over his body for his untimely death and asked what he wished for. He leaves his room and comes to the dining room where Lisa tells him that food is ready. He asks after Noelle and Mylene, but Lisa says she hasn't seen them. Almost immediately, the ladies enter the room, but Noelle is half-dressed, and this makes the plates in Lisa's hands fall. Alan asks Noelle to get some clothes on, but she reminds him that he has seen worse. During breakfast, Noelle reminds Alan that he's supposed to test her new sword today, but this catches Lisa by surprise because Alan also said he'd help with her ducal duties. Not wanting to be left behind, Mylene reminds Alan that he promised to take a nap with her. To worsen matters, an attendant from the guild comes with loads of jobs for Alan. All the girls drag different parts of Alan wanting him to do their job. Somehow, Alan completes them all. Later in the day, Alan tells the girls that he wants to travel to the Victor Empire because it seems like it would be fun. Without getting invited, the jumpy elf starts to daydream like an idiot about the beautiful dwarven skills she has heard exist in the Empire. Noelle declares that she'll go with Alan, and Mylene says the same, even though Alan is not altogether pleased they want to go with him. Lisa thinks the work at the duchy will hold her back. The wagon is ready to go, and Lise shouts back at teary-eyed Beatrice to watch over the duchy while she's gone. Beatrice runs after the wagon as it moves, and she falls while calling Lisa's name. Noelle asks Lisa if leaving the duchy is alright, but Lisa thinks that because the House of Westfelt is in charge of taking care of the borders, and there have been internal issues at the Empire, knowing about the internal issues of the Empire is also important. Noelle asks why Lisa didn't take Beatrice, and she says that Beatrice believes Alan will do a better job protecting Lise. Lisa and Noelle want to sleep so badly in the moving wagon, but find it difficult because they are on a rough road. However, Mylene sleeps like a newborn child despite the roughness. Suddenly, Alan brings the wagon to a stop, waking even Mylene. The girls ask Alan what's wrong, and he points to the sand wolves on the mountain. The girls have heard that they are desert reapers, and they wonder how they'll pass now. Alan kills their worries when he jumps up and kills all the wolves with one slash of his sword each, and he returns to the wagon. The girls are not surprised, but Alan is worried about how the wolves got to stay in such a place. He thinks someone is manipulating things. Inside the town, the party is amazed at how lively things are, even though the place is far from the imperial capital. But Mylene says, the empire is just like that. Alan looks around, and Lisa catches on to his attitude. She asks what's wrong, and Alan says he thinks the town is intimidating because there are too many guards around. Alan mistakenly hits someone, and is surprised to find out it is Henriette Marquis Lindqvist. He asks why someone like her is snooping around town, but before she can answer, Lisa also recognizes Henriette, and the two greet each other. Henriette takes the chance to tell the party to return to their kingdom, because the empire is smoldering with embers that could ignite and turn the country on its head. The girls are not too inclined to leave, and Alan claims that he's a homeless wanderer, well deserving for a hero who doesn't want to be useful. Henriette tells them that the Black Wolf Knights are on the loose and no one should have anything to do with them. After sharing this important news, she runs off and Alan runs after her, telling the ladies to continue the sightseeing while he's going, but the ladies decide to count the number of cows that pass in front of them instead. Alan catches up with Henriette and asks if she warned him as the daughter of the Marquis, or as his former disciple of the Supreme Lords. Henriette claims that she was only his former disciple of the Supreme Lords, and now, she's the daughter of the Marquis, even though she still has some of her powers from the previous life. Alan decides to believe that Henriette warned him because she's worried about him, and he agrees to go back to the kingdom. Alan rushes to get back to the ladies as soon as possible, but there is an explosion in the middle of the town, and a man with a dagger in his hands runs away from guards towards Alan. Alan stops in front of the man and wonders why he's always drawn towards trouble. The man draws out his dagger against Alan, and Alan strikes him with his bare hand, causing the man to fall. Alan knows he can't hand over the man to the knights just like that because it will brew a lot of questions, but before he can decide what to do, a demon kills the man. The captain of the knights catches Alan in the scene and asks how he managed to kill the man without the use of gifts or weapons. Alan wonders how the captain knows that Alan didn't use gifts, and she says her gift is the ability to see the gift that others have used. Alan claims he's not a demon, and the captain doesn't believe. Things become difficult for Alan because he knows he can't fight and defeat the captain, and he can't run away either. Thankfully, when the captain is about to seize Alan, he disappears. The captain says that the guards should lock the borders. Alan thanks Mylene for saving him and asks about the others, and how Mylene knew to come and save him. Henrietta shouts Alan's name from a distance, and asks why he caused trouble after she told him not to. She explains how she met with the girls after they counted their 20th cow, waiting for Alan, and made a request to use Mylene's power, which is how they saved Alan. Alan says they should go back to their city, but because the borders have been locked, Henrietta takes them to her house. At Henrietta's home, Alan meets the butler who used to be at the house of Westfelt, and he says that Henrietta welcomed them into her home after they left Westfelt in protest. Henrietta stops Silas, the butler, from talking, and they enter the house where Henrietta says she lives alone because her parents have died. Alan asks for information about what's wrong in the Empire, and Henrietta explains that the Emperor died about a year ago. Lisa figures that this is why the Empire didn't help when the kingdom was in trouble, and Henriette says she shared the information because she trusts that they are not loose-mouthed. Henriette visits Alan's room, and Alan asks if the death of the Emperor is the work of demons. Henriette believes that only 2 of them or demons could have killed demons in such a silent way. Alan asks how long Henriette has been watching him because if he wasn't, there was no way she'd have been there to save Silas and also meet him the moment he entered the Empire. Henriette refuses to acknowledge that she has been watching Alan and she leaves the room. Outside the room, Henriette reflects on her happiness to see Alan smile. She knows that he was hurt by people's words and actions when he was a hero. That's why she got worried and reincarnated into the world with him. She wants him to be happy in this life, but she is a little sad that she isn't the one making him happy. Noelle laments about how bored she is in Henriette's house and expresses her wish to see the best blades in the Empire and the Dwarven workshops. Henriette says it'll be impossible for anyone to go out because the town is under the strictest guards and there's nothing for Noelle to see. This response makes Noelle start banging an imaginary sword like an obsessed fool, and Lise is thrown into panic. To solve the problem, Alan reminds Henriette that the knights are looking for him, not for everyone, which means that Noelle should be able to leave the mansion. Henriette has no other choice but to agree, and Noelle is elated that she can finally go out. Noelle and Mylene have a nice time roaming through the town, visiting forges, and eating food from stall to stall. After a short break in the middle of the town, Noelle thanks Mylene for following her, and Mylene says that she's Noelle's bodyguard after all. Noelle observes that a lot of elves have been looking at her since she entered the town, and she asks Mylene if it's because she's so cute. Noelle wonders how to respond if any of the elves approach her, but Mylene doesn't even give the elves a chance to approach Noelle. Back at home, Noelle commends Mylene for saving her after she shares her ordeal with the others. Alan is a little worried, but Noelle says she doesn't mind, because those elves probably approached her because she's cute. Henrietta tells Noelle that the elves approached her for another reason, and she volunteers to take them all to the elven forest. Henriette brings them outside the mansion and uses her magic to transport them to another dimension. She explains that the elven forest was hidden from intruders, and that anyone who leaves loses their memories without an exception. Noelle wonders if this is why she remembers nothing from her past life. Alan asks Henriette if she's involved in the hiding of the elven forest, and she says she did a little here and there. The party has barely gone far into the forest when they are suddenly surrounded by many elves, scaring them. Alan tells everyone to be calm because the elves mean no harm. Henriette adds that they are all being like that because their sovereign, Noelle, who possesses the eyes of the fairy sovereign, has returned. Noelle recalls that the demon man that attacked them at the village mentioned it, and Henriette explains that only people from the royal family possess the gift. The regent of the ruler in the forest introduces himself as Percival. After all the elves get on their knees and call Noelle their liege. Noelle is taken aback, but Percival says they are in no rush, and he would be glad to show Noelle around the forest first. As they walk through the forest, Alan says the elves are as carefree as he heard, and Mylene wants nothing but sleep at that moment. Noelle expresses her surprise to see furniture in the forest, and when Percival mentions Henriette shuts him up. Some children run towards Noelle and give her some fruits, promising to give her something even better the next day. Percival asks them to run along because he's busy showing the liege around the forest, and Noelle quickly corrects Percival about addressing her as their liege. A young boy named Philip comes out from behind a tree according to Percival's orders, and Percival doesn't allow him to talk to Noelle because he called the small children from earlier bad guys. This scene worries Noelle. Two knights, Oswald and Lisetta, meet behind a house at night, and Lisetta asks if Oswald has found the entrance to the elven forest. She tells him not to ruin their plans, and once they are done talking, the two of them disperse in different directions. During the bonfire at night, while the elves surround Noelle, Percival asks for a chance to speak with Alan. He tells Alan that elves cannot live without their liege for long, because it causes them to stop growing and bearing children, which means they face a slow death. He also tells Alan that Henriette brought back hope to the forest when she told him that she knew a lost royal, which happened to be Noelle. After this, Henriette brought them different things from different cultures, and allowed the elves to learn about other cultures and gain the courage to move around town among other people. Henriette also helped to protect the forest. Alan is happy to learn that Henriette has not changed from the person he knew her to be. He asks Percival if Henriette was also the one who introduced the demon children that gave Noelle fruits in the forest earlier. Percival is surprised to see that Alan knew who those demon children were, but he still tells Alan that Henriette brought the children about 3 years ago and asked the village to protect them. Alan says that the elves had a lot of issues with it, but eventually learned to start accepting it. Philip is watching the demon children have fun in the bonfire, and he frowns angrily. Later at night, Lisa asks Noelle if she's fine, and Noelle says that Lise must be blind to think she looks fine. Mylene asks Noelle if she's willing to become the ruler of the elves, but Noelle is unsure and needs time to think about it. A little while later, everyone but Noelle retires to the rooms provided by the elves. Noelle wonders what she wants to do with her life, since she has already fulfilled Vanessa's wish, and suddenly, as she walks out into the night sky, Noelle realizes what a dumb fool she has been, going about life without a purpose for her own. Alan watches Noelle from his window, and Henriette visits Alan's room because he gave her a strange look when everyone was leaving for their rooms earlier. He asks her why she brought the demon children to the elven forest, and Henriette explains that demons are not a distinct race, because humans with an immense amount of hatred are the people who become demons. Since demon children are born to demon parents, it means they didn't become demons of their own accord. Hence, they shouldn't be killed for no just reason. She saved them just as they were about to be killed and brought them to the elven forest for safety. The next day, Noelle and the rest of the party are on a tour with Percival. Henriette tells Noelle not to worry herself too much thinking about the elves, encouraging her to make a decision that is comfortable for her because the elves are starting to learn to live without a ruler. The demon children come with spirit stones to Noelle, and Philip throws the stones away, asking the demon children to leave, but Percival warns Philip to be careful. Henriette meets with Philip where he's hiding in town, and tells him not to be so mean to the demon children, because they haven't done anything wrong to him, and they don't deserve to be treated badly, because they love the sovereign as much as Philip does. She tells Philip to come back to the forest soon, and she leaves. Philip decides that he needs to apologize, but as soon as he stands up, Oswald catches him, and asks him to show him the way to the elven forest. The elves set a banquet before Noelle and the rest of the people with her. Malene doesn't wait for approval before she gobbles up the food like a homeless glutton. The others also enjoy the food, but Noelle finds it hard to eat because she prefers meat to what they have set. Henriette declares her return home and leaves Percival, the regent, as a tour guide for Alan and the ladies. Percival tries to convince Henriette not to bother herself with the missing elf, but she says she'll try to find him since she also has to go back to her mansion. Noelle asks if it's the little boy Philip who left the forest and hasn't returned, and Percival confirms her suspicions. Henrietta looks for Philip in town. Back amid the elves in the elven village, Alan mentions that the elves live a carefree life, but Mylene thinks the elves are lazy. Percival explains that the elves are wired to see the world differently because they live for a longer time than anyone in the world. Alan asks how they eat, and Percival raises his hands as some apples fall out of the sky. He further explains that the forest shares its bounty, so food is not a problem. Using his eyes, Alan sees that the forest and the elves blend, intriguing Percival. This discovery of peace and quiet makes Alan say that he wants to live in the forest. Percival says that people cannot live in the forest, and the girls ask about the demon children that Henriette brought into the elven forest. Percival says that the demon children are allowed to stay for only a short period, and Alan requests to stay for a short period. Percival agrees, and to answer the girls' question, he tells them that a short period is about 100 years. The forest tells Percival that they have a visitor, and the tour ends. Alan asks them to return to their chamber because they don't want someone from the Empire to see them, since the knights are still on the lookout for Alan. Mylene cheats while playing chess with Noelle by knocking Noelle's pieces off the board whenever she makes her move. Lisa asks Alan why he's considering staying in the elven village, and he says it's the most peaceful place he has seen since he started his search. Lisa and Alan argue, and Mylene and Noelle watch them like they would watch a cheating husband and monster wife. Noelle wants to live in the forest to make up her mind whether or not she will become the liege of the elves, and Mylene has sworn her life to be with Noelle wherever she is. Lisa announces that she will stay too, but she is the only one who can't stay because of her title and the fact that she has to watch over a duchy. This makes Lisa's eyes get teary. Back at home, Henriette meets Lisette Berwald, captain of the Black Wolf Knights. She claims that someone told her that the assassin who killed the Emperor is hiding under Henriette's roof, but when Henriette asks who told her this, she confesses that she came to Henriette's place on a hunch, because Henriette is the only one capable of the sorcery that has made the suspect disappear without a trace. Henriette's house is searched, and Lisette threatens her with the elven forest. Percival comes out to see that one of the Black Wolf Knights used Philip to find his way and gain access to the elven forest. As soon as Percival arrives, the man spits out the fruit from the forest out of his mouth and complains that no one should eat such a thing. Percival recalls Henriette's warning when the knight asked if he was the head of the forest. Henriette had told him not to engage with the knights because too much authority had been granted to them, and they could easily spring unnecessary trouble. Percival tells the knight that he's the regent to the elven sovereign and asks him to state his business. The knight says that he heard that the elven village is harboring a criminal, and he wants the criminal brought out immediately. The demon children come running with fruit because they notice that there is a visitor, and this makes it too late for Percival to hide the identity of the children. The knight uses explosion power, and at the same time, Noelle gets a nudge from the spirit stones the demon children gave her earlier. Mylene leaves with Noelle when Noelle says that attacking children is cruel, but Alan has a conflict in his mind, whether or not to go, because he's not a hero anymore, and he wants to live a peaceful life. In his past life, he wouldn't have hesitated, but he also recalls that it wasn't worth it then either. However, when Lisa asks if he will go too, Lisa and Alan run after Noelle and Mylene. Percival uses his powers to rescue the children from the explosion. The knight commends Percival for his efforts, but he says he's not going anywhere because the execution of the demon children is a done deal, even though they have not done anything wrong. Percival tells the knight to leave, and when he doesn't comply, he tells the demon children to hide. However, the knight appears to be smarter because he blasts the tree from behind Percival, to Percival's dismay. The knight catches the demon children, but Philip gets in the way, and he tries to kill Philip, but Noelle throws a hammer on the knight's head. Percival and the kids are happy to see their potential sovereign, but Noelle introduces herself as a smith and Mylene as her shop clerk. They tell the saw-toothed jerk knight to leave, but instead, he snaps his fingers to cause an explosion, and Mylene saves Noelle. There is a continuous snapping of fingers and scurrying until Percival draws a sword from the forest to attack the knight. However, the knight is much faster than Percival. The knight is about to hit Percival with a final strike but is stopped by Alan's sword. Alan uses his eyes to defuse the knight's fuse, and the knight decides to go against Alan with his sword. But Alan transports himself from the front of the knight to his back, confusing the knight. Alan asks why the knight tried to kill the demon children, and the knight says he doesn't need a valid reason to kill demons. The knight turns back to strike Alan with his sword, but Alan jumps and strikes down the knight instead. The knight falls face down to the ground. Lisa heals the children and tells Alan that she's happy he saved them from danger, because the children did nothing wrong, since they are still too young to differentiate right from wrong. Alan thanks Lisa for her comment. Milane tries to wake the knight, but he's unconscious, and that makes it difficult for him to be questioned. Alan is worried that Henriette won't like what they have done, and as if on cue, Henriette shows up in the forest, but Percival saves Alan's nosy ass from Henriette by telling her that Alan did all he did to save them. Henriette doesn't argue with them, but instead informs them that the blockades on the roads have been lifted, which means that they can all return to their homes. It's time to go, and Percival finds it hard to let Noella go, because he hoped she'd stay with them in the forest, even if she didn't become their sovereign. However, Noella thinks there's a lot she has to learn in the world, and she feels like she can only learn those things if she continues her travels with Alan and his party. The party says goodbye to the elven village and the demon children. On the other hand, Henriette is taken into custody by Lisette as the suspect who killed the emperor. Lisette adds as they ride out of Henriette's house in a wagon that this completes their deal. The party is done loading the supplies they need for the journey into the wagon, but Lisa doesn't look too happy, and when Alan asks her what the problem is, she expresses her sadness at the fact that they didn't get the chance to thank Henriette and also tell her goodbye. Just as they are about to leave, a young man runs to them and asks them to save his sister, but Alan hesitates because they don't want to cause trouble anymore. However, the man introduces himself as Curtis Lindqvist, revealing that he is Henriette's brother. Alan and the girls are seated with Curtis in a pub, and he explains to them that Henriette was detained by the Black Wolf Knights with a charge of assassinating the emperor. Noelle says that this is a false accusation, and Curtis agrees, but he also says that because it's most likely a plan by nobles and factions, every evidence will be ignored. He says he has no power to help Henriette, and since they are also isolated within the Lindqvist family, because of Henriette's attitude, the family won't help either. However, Lisa recalls that Henriette is an only child whose parents have died. Alan asks Curtis for time to think things through, and Curtis pleads with them to save Henriette regardless. The girls meet with Alan where he sits on the back of the wagon, and Lisa tells him that she finds Curtis suspicious because Henriette doesn't have a younger brother, and they have never seen him. Alan agrees with Lisa, but he also tells her that Henriette has truly been taken into custody by the Black Wolf Knights and is on her way to the imperial capital, heavily guarded. Alan decides that they have to go head-on into the current situation to find out the truth, even if it is a trap. Henriette is intrigued by the fact that she gets a comfortable ride to the imperial capital, even with the cuffs on her wrists. Henriette says that she ought to be treated better, but Lisette says that she needs to keep her eye on Henriette since she's peculiar, and they don't want her to escape. Henriette asks if Alan and the others are safe. Lisette says that they should be out of the town, Loris, and close to the border. Henriette makes sure that Lisette understands that she would kill her if anything happened to Alan and the others. Alan and the girls meet with Curtis, who is glad that they came. Curtis introduces them to his guard and coachman, who was wearing a helmet, and he offers his coach as their ride to the capital. Inside the coach, Lise and Noelle communicate with their thoughts but have tense looks on their faces that worries Curtis. When he asks them what's wrong, they commend his coach instead of stating their true feelings. Out of the blue, dumb Alan thinks he's smart when he asks Curtis if he's truly Henriette's brother, and how he knows that they are Henriette's friends. Noelle quickly supports Alan's questions, seeking answers. Curtis confesses that he's from a lesser branch of the Lindqvist family, and Henriette is his cousin. He says that when he was younger, Henrietta was the only one who stood up for him, while others mocked him for his lack of talents and abilities. However, his parents took him away from Henriette because they didn't like her, and he could only watch her from afar, which is also the way he got to know about them. He was watching Henriette when she met them, and when Henriette was taken by the knights too, all he could do was watch. Lisa comforts Curtis and tells him that he is strong by coming to them for help. Curtis changes the topic and asks Alan about his relationship with Henriette. Alan says they are just friends, but no one wants to believe, and Mylene even asks if Alan is married to Henriette, causing Lisa to shout and inciting a commotion in the coach. Curtis is amazed that Henriette has these kinds of people as friends. Later at night, Henriette and Lisette are the only ones trapped in the wagon, because Lisette wants to follow the orders of not taking her eyes off Henriette for a moment. Henriette asks what happened with the knight that attacked the elven forest, and Lisette says the knight, Oswald, was granted pardon because the murderer of the emperor was caught. This answer angers Henriette, but she allows herself to be comforted with the fact that Alan is safe. On getting to another town in the Empire, Curtis, Alan, and the girls are unable to move farther because the town gates are suddenly locked and movements are restricted. Curtis apologizes for bringing them somewhere that has caused a blockage, but Alan tells him not to feel guilty because they stopped to restock their supplies. Alan and Lise agree to gather information about the reason for the block at the Adventurers Guild, while Mylene and Noelle stay back with Curtis at the lodgings, because the presence of elves and Amazoness is not common in the Empire. Lisa is glad to be alone with Alan. Alan and Lisa enter the guild with hoodies to hide themselves. Back at the cottage, Curtis gives Mylene and Noelle a key to their room, but Noelle asks if it's really safe for them to stay there, because the Knights may be looking for them. Curtis assures them that the cottage won't sell them out, and even if they do, they have his guard to protect them. Mylene questions the guard, who still has his armor and helmet on, but Noelle stops her and they leave the room. Alan and Lisi are unable to find useful information at the guild, except that the Black Wolf Knights are looking for a party of 6 that left Loris. Alan, who doesn't want to be useful, thinks they should go back to the others before they are found. But just as they are about to leave, a knight enters the guild, commanding everyone to stay still or be cut down. The knight announces that they are looking for a party of 6 who left Loris with no further information. When the adventurers refuse to cooperate, she tells them that there is a reward of 100 coins for whoever reveals any information. One of the adventurers points in Alan and Lisa's direction, but the duo have disappeared. The knight rushes outside, chasing after Alan and Lise, who are running away. She tells them to stop, but Alan tells Lise that they don't have to listen since they are not adventurers. The knight hits a kid about the same time Alan jumps and disappears with Lise in his arms, but because the knight wants to help the kid, she stops chasing the duo. Alan advises that they shouldn't join up with the others yet now that they are sure they are the ones the knights are looking for. However, they hear an explosion from the direction of the cottage, and when they get there, they meet Oswald on a pile of rubbles, holding an unconscious Mylene and Noelle in his hands, saying he'll pay Alan back for what he did at the Elven Forest. Some demons attack a village, and a little boy cries for help from a shed where he's hiding. When a demon is about to attack the little boy, the nosy dumbass hero, Alan, shows up and stabs the demon from the back, causing it to fall face down before the little boy. Alan smiles at the boy and extends his hand to help him. At the scene of Oswald holding the unconscious girls, Lisa sees Curtis caught under some rubble, telling her that there was an explosion out of nowhere. Lisa attempts to help Curtis, but Oswald stops her and says that she shouldn't get strange ideas because the battle is between him and Alan. Oswald faces Alan and asks why he's so calm when everyone around him is in danger, but instead of showing fear, Alan asks Oswald to decide which would happen faster. Oswald strangling the girls to death, and Alan cutting off Oswald's head. Oswald is taken aback by this question, and Alan uses the chance to strike his sword and free the girl from Oswald's deadly grip. Alan tells Oswald to stop screaming because he has questions for him, but Oswald laughs instead. Oswald says that he recognized he can't beat Alan, and to overpower him, he casts the explode spell on everyone around, which means that he can make everyone explode at the snap of his fingers. Alan recalls the child that he saved from demons in that village, and how he rejected Alan's help because he found Alan scary. Alan reminds himself that he doesn't need to save people he doesn't know, because he's not a hero anymore. He thinks about what he needs to focus on as a child struggles to drag his sister out of the rumbles. As Oswald snaps his fingers, Alan takes control of the situation, and he cuts off the fuse that Oswald placed on them all, ending with the boy who was trying to save his sister earlier. He rescues the boy's sister too. Oswald doesn't understand why no one explodes, but Alan has no time for explanations. He places his sword on Oswald's neck and asks if he has any last words. Alan is about to cut off the neck when one of the knights, who identifies herself as the vice captain of the Black Wolf Knights, Celia Bartolis, stops Alan. She pleads with Alan to withdraw his sword because Oswald should be punished by the knights, not Alan. After much pleading from Celia and hesitating for a while, Alan drops his sword. Lisa tells Alan that she has healed the wounded, and the movement ban on the city has been lifted. Alan and Lise wonder why the bans have been listed when they have not been caught. They also wonder who is ordering the knights, since the Emperor is dead, but they have no concrete answers to these questions. In the woods, later at night, Celia communicates with Lisette through a hologram, and she asks why they lifted the ban when the culprits have not been caught. But Lisette tells Celia that it is none of her business. Celia asks for Lisette's permission to finish off Oswald, but Lisette tells Celia not to worry, because their leader will do it himself, since Oswald is the dog that betrayed his master. Right before the eyes of the knights, a demon eats up Oswald. Lisette confines Henriette to a chamber on arrival at the capital. Henriette asks Lisette to stay with her to lessen the boredom, but Lisette refuses, claiming that she has other duties to carry out, and she asks what she can get for Henriette instead. Henriette says that she can get her a few books. Alan and the others realize that they can't enter the capital without travel permits, and it is not likely that anyone would give a group like them the permit they need. Mylene suggests that they charge straight in through the gates, but Alan tells her to give up on that idea. Like a fool, Lisa suggests that they dig a hole and bypass the gates, but Alan reveals the folly in her idea when he says that they can come out amid nights on the other side. However, Curtis announces that Lisa's idea is indeed great, because there are secret tunnels that they can pass into the capital. He tells them that the tunnels were built in case of emergencies. Alan agrees to take the tunnel with the girls while Curtis and his coachman go in through the gate. Locating the tunnel didn't take much effort, and soon enough, Alan and the girls are going through the dark, lonely place until they hear the sound of some knights coming through. Quickly, Mylene uses her invincibility powers to hide the party, and when they are safe, She tells them how tired the action made her. Noelle wonders if the knights have come looking for them because Curtis has been caught, but Alan suspects something is not right. A few more steps into the tunnel, and the party meets with Lisette, who knows they are hiding with Mylene's powers. Since they don't reveal themselves, Lisette shoots an arrow at them, and Alan catches it before it can cause any damage. The girls remain in hiding, but Lisette shoots another arrow to reveal them. Lisette agrees to let the girls go because she only aims to kill Alan. Alan tells the girls to go ahead of him because he's not confident that he can beat Lisette while protecting the girls. Once the girls leave, Lisette draws her sword, ready for a battle with Alan. She moves so fast with a speed synonymous with lightning, and Alan doesn't move from where he is unless her sword hits him. When she relaxes after a while, Alan asks Lisette why she's holding back when she could have killed him multiple times. Lisette refuses to acknowledge that she's holding back because of Henriette's warning to kill her if anything happens to Alan and the others. In her state of distraction, Alan kicks Lisette back, and at that moment, the underground tunnel starts caving in. Lisette says she knows nothing about the explosion that's causing the tunnel to break, and Alan says they could get buried alive. The girls watch the underground tunnel cave in from the cottage where they are, and Lise is worried that Alan has been buried alive. Curtis smiles sneakily, but no one sees him. When Lise mentions Alan's name, he shows up behind them, shocking them all. He asks Curtis why he looks like he has seen a dead man, but Curtis says he's glad that Alan has come back alive. He tells them all to get some rest, because he doesn't have any plan to save Henriette yet. Alan says he's going out to run an errand. Alan appears in Henriette's room while she's reading a book, and she's shocked to see him. She asks why he's there, and he says he has come to save her because she has been framed, but Henriette says she doesn't want Alan to save her. Alan accepts Henriette's decision, and they tell each other goodbye. The next day, Curtis tells Alan and the girls that they can't be involved in saving Henriette, because the Empire already suspects that Alan's kingdom colluded with Henriette to kill the Emperor, and the situation could plunge them into war. Although the girls don't agree, Alan says they should leave the Empire, and Curtis promises to save Henriette somehow. Henriette is finally thrown into a cell, and she meets Curtis there, enveloped in some demonic aura. Henriette calls him Curtis Harness Victor, and he laughs evilly. Henriette says she has a truckload of questions, but she wants to know who Curtis is working for first. Curtis says he set everything up by himself, but Henriette doesn't believe it, because she knows Curtis to be a lazy, incompetent fool. However, Curtis lifts his hands to show her his powers, and she's shocked. But Curtis says that the powers turned the tables in his favor. Henriette asks if Curtis killed the entire Imperial family to gain control over the Black Wolf Knights, but Curtis says that he threatened their lazy asses and they ran away. Still confused, Henriette asked why Curtis framed her as the murderer of the Emperor. Curtis says that he wants to become the Emperor, but no one will acknowledge him because his mother was a pheasant. The only way he can gain acknowledgement is by marriage to Henriette. Henriette is not interested in Curtis's stupid plan or revenge, so she goes to sleep and Curtis leaves the cell, saying he will give her time to think about it. Outside the cell, Curtis meets with Lisette and says he heard she almost got buried alive. She tells him not to concern himself and apologizes for not killing Alan, but Curtis is satisfied with the fact that Alan has left the Empire and may not return. Alan and others are in the wagon on the way back to the kingdom, and since Noelle can't bear the unbearable silence in the wagon, she screams. Alan says things are quiet because they don't have anything to talk about, but Noelle is bent on saying anything. She assures Alan that she won't judge him for the decision he made, and both Lisa and Mylene agree. Alan tells them that Henriette also told him that she didn't need his help when he saw her the last time, and the girls are surprised that Alan has seen Henriette. To lighten the mood, Alan announces that they will stop for an afternoon break, and he informs the coachman to branch somewhere. Lisette brings Henriette's book to the cell and apologizes that she got thrown in a place like that. Picking up the book, Henriette remembers Alan's visit to the chamber the last time. He was right. She had loved reading heroic tales since her past life. Henriette has always loved heroes, but she hates the ultimate untimely death they have to go through. For this reason, she tried her best to guide Alan in their past life, but he still fell victim to the death. This time, she's glad that she can be of help to Alan, even if she has to leave the world earlier than him. Curtis returns to Henriette's cell and asks if she's ready to give him an answer, but Henriette tells Curtis not to expect anything from her. Curtis says the Empire will have her killed at this rate, but she reminds Curtis that he's the one who planned it in the first place. Curtis threatens Henriette with Alan and the Elven Forest, but she's not moved because Curtis can't reach either. Out of annoyance, Curtis punches Henriette and hits her multiple times, asking why she's so stubborn. Realizing what he's doing, Curtis apologizes and runs out of the cell. Inside his room, he laments, asking why everything isn't going according to plan, but an idea pops in his head, and he smiles evilly. Noelle and Mylene return to the wagon with some supplies from the town where they stopped, but Alan gives them another list and sends them back into the town. He meets with Lisa and asks what's bothering her. Lisa says she wants them to go back and save Henriette, even if Henriette doesn't want to be saved. The coachman encourages them to go back indeed. Curtis returns to Henriette's cell again like a fool, and demands the same thing, but this time, when Henriette refuses, he unleashes his power and strangles Henriette with demon hands. However, Alan arrives and cuts them off with his sword. Curtis is surprised to see Alan in the cell with his coachman, who removes her helmet and identifies herself as Celia. Curtis is devastated to see that Celia betrayed him, but Celia says she didn't betray Curtis because she's not in agreement with all that he's doing. Alan, on the other hand, can't wait to end the scene quickly. In the past, Curtis begs a demon to help him because he wants to make Henriette his. As a response, the demon severs the head of the Emperor and asks Curtis to become the Emperor. Curtis thinks that this is absurd because he's not a part of the royal family and no one will take him seriously, but the demon offers to give him the power that will overturn everything. The demon releases part of himself into Curtis, making Curtis pick up a knife and kill the demon completely until he becomes one with him. Back in the cell, Curtis asks Alan if he's mocking his power, but Alan tells Curtis that the power isn't his. Curtis is too stubborn and red-eyed to listen to reason. His only focus is to fight, and he starts attacking everyone in the cell by first destroying the cell. Alan and Celia take turns cutting the limbs that Curtis continuously produces for his attacks. When Henriette tells Curtis that he's foolish for thinking he can overpower Alan, Curtis shifts his focus and attacks Celia instead. Henrietta catches Celia and asks Curtis why he wants to be the Emperor so badly that he accepts a demon's power, but Alan quickly shows Henriette that she's more dense than them all. Alan slashes Curtis one more time, and this time, he falls and loses the strength to fight. He asks Alan why he came back when everything he planned was coming to place, but Alan reminds Curtis that his plan was too sloppy. Alan says he doesn't understand why Curtis wants to be an emperor, but Curtis says that's what he wants. Alan asks why he approached him and tried to kill him. It soon becomes clear that rather than being the emperor, what Curtis wants is Henriette. Curtis cries, and Henriette holds Celia's hand, saying they should leave. However, Henriette goes back to Curtis and apologizes that she can't return his feelings. Instead, Curtis laughs, seizes Henriette, and says he will kill Alan so that Henriette can belong to him. The power consumes Curtis so much that his face is beginning to look like a demon's. Celia and Alan keep holding him out, but the moment it gets a little hard, Lisette shows up and helps them. Curtis asks Lisette if she knows what she's doing, and she says she needs to return the favor she owes Alan. Curtis fully embraces the demon's power, saying he will kill them all, but Alan quickly cuts him into two and stabs him in the heart. Alan sees through Curtis, and Curtis asks why Alan didn't try to rule the world with the ultimate power that he has. Alan says he wants a peaceful life because power is not as good as Curtis thinks, but Curtis is jealous because he believes everyone, including Henriette, would have acknowledged him if he possessed such power. Curtis disappears, and Henriette attempts to thank Alan for coming to save her, but she only ends up fighting with him again. Lisette tells them to run before things get more complicated. To solve the matter, Curtis's scheme was hidden, and the Empire pretended to execute Henriette, bringing the Lindqvist family to an end. Henriette cries in Alan's wagon, saying the ending of the story is tragic. Henrietta asks Alan to touch her to find out if she's a ghost, but he refuses, and the girls touch her instead. On a break, Henrietta asks Alan why he saved her, and he says he did it because he wanted to. Henrietta believes that Alan is everyone's hero.